Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something really central for so many people, a challenge that's part psychology, part linguistics, and let's be honest, part sheer willpower. We're talking about the journey to speaking English fluently. If you're learning English, I bet you know this feeling. You read pretty complex stuff, you understand podcasts like this one maybe, but then you get into a real conversation and your brain just freezes up. That perfect sentence you had vanishes and you just feel stuck.
Oh, absolutely. That hesitation, that kind of cognitive stall, it's what holds so many otherwise advanced learners back. They often have really strong receptive skills,
Yeah.
reading, listening comprehension, top notch. But when it comes to actually producing the language, especially speaking, that's where the anxiety really kicks in. Often the internal pressure, the need to be perfect, it's a bigger enemy than, say, forgetting a grammar rule.
Right. It's that fear. So what we've tried to do here is dig into the research, into what really works, and pull together a really practical framework. We're not just talking about, study more. We've distilled 10 tips, 10 strategies that are interconnected. And these are specifically designed to help you, the listener, break through those barriers, to move past just understanding and really start speaking more smoothly, more confidently, with real assurance. Our mission today: unpack these tips, show you not just what to do, but also the why behind each one, why it actually works.
And what's really fascinating, I think, when you look at the sources, is how the path to speaking fluency often starts way before you even open your mouth. It really begins with a shift in your mindset, a foundational change. Because if we don't tackle those mental roadblocks first, honestly, all the vocabulary lists and flashcards in the world, they won't make the difference you want.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's get into that psychological foundation then, starting with what might be the single most critical point in this whole deep dive. Tip 1, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Now, I know that sounds a bit like generic advice, maybe like just relax. But the cognitive insight here is actually quite profound. That fear of messing up, of sounding silly, it's the number one reason people hesitate. It just stops them cold.
It really does. It paralyzes the learner. And if you look at this from a language acquisition perspective, the research is clear. Mistakes aren't failures. They're actually described as an essential and completely natural part of learning any complex skill. Think of them like data points, necessary feedback. They tell you exactly where your internal language model needs a little tweak, a calibration.
I found the analogy used in some of the sources really helpful here. Comparing adult language learning to how babies learn to talk. I mean, babies don't worry about perfect grammar, do they? They make tons of errors, often quite funny ones. But they get feedback, they adjust, and they're completely free of that self-judgment that social anxiety adults pile on themselves. Yet as adult learners, we often set this impossibly high bar. We demand native-like accuracy right from the get-go.
And that self-imposed pressure, that's precisely why progress can just stall out. If you pause for, say, 5 seconds trying to remember the perfect verb tense, you've likely missed your chance in the conversation. The flow is just gone. Plus, let's be realistic. In most everyday situations, native English speakers, they're usually incredibly understanding, supportive even. They value the fact that you're trying to communicate way more than they notice or care about a minor grammatical slip.
Okay, so if we accept that mistakes are basically just feedback, how do we actually stop that fear from shutting us down? How do we manage it in the moment? And that leads us perfectly into the next related idea, doesn't it? Prioritizing getting the message across, which is tip 8, focus on fluency over perfection.
Yes, exactly. This tip directly challenges that little voice inside, that internal grammar critic. Many learners, particularly those maybe with a more academic background, they get so fixated on achieving grammatical perfection, they end up overactivating what linguists sometimes call the monitor hypothesis. They're constantly editing themselves in real time, and the result, those long, awkward pauses. Halting, hesitant speech.
But hang on a second, I can hear some listeners thinking, if I only focus on speed and just getting the words out, won't I just cement bad habits? Won't I learn the wrong way, making it way harder to fix those errors later on? How do the sources balance that? The need for effective communication versus the risk of fossilizing mistakes?
That's a really critical question, and yeah, the research addresses it directly. The framework suggests this. When you're learning to speak, particularly in those earlier stages, the primary goal has to be intelligibility. Can you be understood? You need to convey your message effectively. If your listener gets your point, even with a minor slip-up in grammar, then communication has succeeded. The source material often uses a metaphor like building a house. Fluency being understood, keeping the conversation moving, that's like the strong foundation and the basic structure. It needs to be solid and functional first. accuracy, that grammatical perfection that's more like the fine details, the decorations, the exact paint color, that comes later once the house is standing strong.
Ah, okay. So prioritize getting the structure sound first. Build that core ability to communicate effectively. And once you establish that competence, that feeling of, okay, I can make myself understood, that confidence then gives you the sort of psychological platform, the boost you need to go back later and start refining the details, the grammar. So confidence actually fuels the effort to perfect things, not the other way around.
Precisely. It connects perfectly. Confidence really stems from that feeling of effective communication. Once you realize, hey, I can get my idea across, even if it wasn't flawless English, that sense of effectiveness boosts your confidence right away. And that, in turn, makes you more willing, more eager to speak more. It creates a positive cycle.
That really does set a great mental stage.
Okay.
Okay, so we've given ourselves permission to be imperfect, to prioritize flow. Now what? Now we need to build the actual mental machinery for speed, right? We need that internal training, practicing even when there's no one else around, which brings us squarely into the cognitive core of fluency development.
Right. And this takes us to what many sources describe as a truly transformative strategy, though admittedly it can be quite difficult initially. It's tip 5. Think in English.
Yes. This one's tough because for so many learners, the default pathway is just painfully slow, isn't it? You have the thought in your native language, L1, then you mentally translate it into English, then you try to speak it. That translation loop, that's what makes speech sound hesitant and, frankly, unnatural. The whole aim here is to somehow bypass that translation step entirely, to forge a direct link between the thought itself and the English words needed to express it.
Exactly. And it is challenging because it requires real, active mental discipline, conscious effort, especially at first. The literature suggests starting small, really small, like focusing on immediate labeling. So when you see an everyday object, a chair, a tree, your phone, you have to consciously, immediately generate the English word for it. You have to actively stop that native word from popping into your head first. We saw that example, I think it was Portuguese, where a learner had to train themselves to think dog instantly instead of letting pão or cachorro jump in.
Right. That immediate effort forces your brain to build a direct connection, a direct schema between the concept, the thing itself, and the English word. And if you keep doing that consistently, what starts as a conscious effort gradually becomes more subconscious. Yeah. More automatic.
And the next level up from that simple labeling is internal narration. This is powerful. Basically, you narrate your own day, your actions, your plans, silently inside your head, but entirely in English. So if you're making breakfast, you think, okay, first, I'm getting the eggs out of the fridge. Now I need to crack them into the bowl. You detail the steps. You're effectively practicing sentence structure, vocabulary retrieval, the whole 9 yards, but without any external pressure or fear of judgment.
And that kind of internal practice is so valuable because it forces you to bump up against the words you don't know yet or the grammar structures you stumble over mentally. You realize, hang on, how do I say, I wish I had bought in this context? And you can then look it up, figure it out, and integrate it all in a private setting before you actually need it in a live conversation.
Yeah, consistent internal monologue practice helps you formulate more complex thoughts directly in English. It builds that fluency muscle, that direct pathway, and helps you react much, much faster in real conversations because you've started cutting out that L1 middleman.
And what's great about this silent internal practice is how smoothly it can transition into the next tip, which is related but distinct. Tip 7, talk to yourself out loud. Self-talk. We really need to emphasize this one, I think, because it bridges that gap beautifully between just thinking the English and actually producing the sounds. It's practice without consequences, without embarrassment.
Absolutely. It's a completely low-stakes environment, and that's vital for developing what's called motor memory. You know, speaking English isn't purely mental, it's physical, too. Your mouth, your tongue, your vocal cords, they all need to get used to forming unfamiliar English sounds, rhythms, and sentence patterns. Self-talk gives you those necessary repetitions. It's like exercise for your mouth muscles.
And the ways you can apply it are just endless, aren't they? Describe what you're seeing out the window. Describe what you're doing as you cook dinner. Read signs aloud as you walk down the street. Narrate your plans for the weekend.
And we should definitely mention the role-playing technique here, too. It's highly recommended in the sources. Practice conversations you know are coming up. Got a job interview next week? Rehearse your answers to common questions out loud. Going to a restaurant. Practice ordering your meal. Or, just for fun, have imaginary chats with, I don't know, your favorite English-speaking actor or a character from a show. Try to predict how they might respond. It sounds silly, maybe, but it works.
The more times you do it, the more you actually hear your own voice producing English sentences, the more natural it starts to feel. It really solidifies that connection between the brain's intention to speak and the mouth's physical action of speaking.
Exactly right. And when you combine these two, the internal thinking in English, tip 5, and the external talking to yourself, tip 7, it means you can essentially be practicing English almost constantly. You can turn dead time, like waiting for a bus or doing chores, into really productive, focused learning time.
That's a really powerful pair of strategies. Okay, so we've got the right mindset. We're practicing internally and externally. Now let's talk about expanding the actual stuff we have to work with, moving beyond just basic words and building a richer, more flexible toolkit for expression.
Yes, this is where we shift focus a bit towards the building blocks, starting with tip 3, expand your vocabulary. The link to fluency here is incredibly direct. If you're constantly pausing, searching your mental dictionary for a basic word, well, your speech flow just falls apart. The broader and more readily accessible your vocabulary, the easier it becomes to express yourself, especially when you need to convey more nuanced ideas.
Right. But vocabulary expansion isn't just about memorizing lists of definitions, is it? That's often how people approach it. But the research really emphasizes something more active. It's about moving words from your passive or receptive vocabulary, words you understand when you read or hear them, into your active or productive vocabulary. Words you can actually pull out and use correctly when you're speaking.
And that shift requires dedicated learning in context. While, sure, using flashcard apps or keeping a vocab notebook is fine for that initial exposure, the contextual piece is absolutely crucial. It's not enough to know what a word means. You have to learn how to use it correctly, how it fits into a sentence, what other words it typically hangs out with its collocations.
That's such an important distinction. We need to pay close attention to how native speakers actually use new words. Notice them in books, hear them in podcasts, catch them in conversations, understand their nuances, their connotations, the prepositions they take. Just knowing the definition of, say, compatible isn't enough. You need to know that things are compatible with each other. That's the contextual usage.
And strategic learning comes into play here too. It means focusing not just on single words, but on related words, especially synonyms. If you learn 5 different ways to say important, crucial, vital, essential, significant, key, you gain incredible flexibility when you speak. If one word happens to slip your mind in the middle of a sentence, bang, you've got 4 others ready to go. It makes your English sound much more natural, much more agile.
Yeah, that adaptability is huge. Knowing multiple ways to phrase something reduces your reliance on finding that one perfect word, which helps prevent those frustrating moments where you just freeze up.
And this idea leads us straight into a really powerful, more advanced application of vocabulary learning. Tip 4, learn and study phrases, not just individual words. Because ultimately, fluency isn't defined by how many single nouns you know. It's defined by your ability to speak in whole sentences, or at least coherent chunks, without hesitating excessively.
This is where the concept of language chunks or lexical chunks comes in, right?
Exactly. Native speakers don't usually construct sentences meticulously word by word, especially in casual conversation. We rely heavily on prefabricated blocks, set phrases, common expressions, things we've heard and used thousands of times. Learning these chunks gives your fluency an immediate noticeable boost because you don't have to assemble them grammatically on the fly. You just deploy the whole unit.
Can you give an example of how that works with, say, collocations, those words that just naturally go together?
Sure. Think about how in English we say make a decision, not do a decision, where we take a break, not make a break. We talk about heavy traffic, not usually strong traffic.
Mm.
Mastering these common pairings instantly makes you sound more fluent, and it actually bypasses that internal grammar check because you've stored the whole phrase as one item, like heavy traffic.
That feels like a massive efficiency gain for the brain. If I learn a fixed phrase like on the other hand, or as far as I'm concerned, I don't have to worry about the individual words or prepositions. I just use the whole chunk. So we should focus on really practical examples. Common greetings like how's it going or nice to meet you. Polite phrases like excuse me or could you pass the salt.
Definitely those.
Huh.
But let's push it further into the tools you need for actual conversation management. It's vital to learn phrases for active participation. These are like the scaffolding that holds a dialogue together. Think about phrases for giving your opinion. Well, in my view, the way I see it is, I tend to think that, or phrases for agreeing. That's a good point. I see what you mean. Absolutely. And crucially, phrases for managing the conversation, maybe gaining a little thinking time without stopping completely. That's an interesting question. Let me see.
And perhaps most importantly, Phrases for clarification. If you don't understand something, being able to smoothly say, sorry, could you say that again? Or I didn't quite catch that is so much better than just silence or a blunt what? It keeps the interaction positive and keeps you in control. Learning these whole thoughts, these functional chunks, instead of just isolated words, that really seems like the key to genuine conversational ability.
It absolutely is. The ability to string these chunks together, to transition smoothly between ideas using these learned phrases, that's what creates that perception of flow. It marks the difference between choppy, hesitant speech and smooth, connected discourse.
Okay, this is great. We've built the mental foundation, we're practicing internally, we're expanding our toolkit with words and, crucially, phrases. Now we need to really weave English into the fabric of our lives. This brings us to immersion and the need for consistent practice.
Exactly. That's the core idea behind Tip 6. Immerse yourself in English. The goal here is almost psychological saturation. You want to make English not just a subject you study for an hour here or there, but a constant, unavoidable part of your daily environment. It needs to shift from being a subject to being the atmosphere you live in as much as possible.
And immersion doesn't necessarily mean you have to pack up and move to an English-speaking country, right? Though that helps. It's more about making conscious, active changes to your existing routine. The sources suggest some really practical first steps. Things like changing the language settings on your phone, your laptop, your social media apps to English. Suddenly, you're interacting with the language during everyday, non-study tasks.
And then, of course, there's media consumption. This is huge. Watching English language TV shows and movies, maybe start with English subtitles if you need them, then try without. Listening to English music, podcasts. But the crucial distinction the research makes here is between passive exposure and active engagement.
All right, so passive immersion might be having an English news channel on in the background while you're cooking. It's, okay, better than nothing, maybe. But active immersion is different. It's pausing that TV show when you hear an interesting phrase or a new word you don't know. It's writing it down, maybe looking it up later, trying to use it in your self-talk practice the next day. You're actively mining the content.
Precisely. And we should strongly advocate for reading immersion too. Read things in English that genuinely interest you at your current level, whether that's news articles, blogs about your hobbies, novels, even just song lyrics or social media posts from native speakers. The key is to find material that's engaging but not overwhelmingly difficult, and then gradually challenge yourself. Reading constantly exposes you to correct grammar, sentence structures, and reinforces those language chunks we just talked about. Pay attention.
So immersion sets the stage. It creates the environment. But then we absolutely have to perform. Which circles back beautifully to tip 2. Practice speaking regularly. This reinforces the idea we touched on earlier. Just studying rules and vocabulary, however necessary, is simply not enough. Fluency is a performance skill. It demands actual performance. You have to open your mouth and make the sounds.
It really is like that classic analogy, learning to ride a bicycle. You can read books about balance and physics all day long, but you will never learn to ride until you actually get on the bike, push off, wobble, probably fall a few times, and start pedaling. Speaking is the same. It's a physical skill involving muscle coordination and rapid mental retrieval, and it only improves with consistent practice.
So how do we make that regular practice happen? We need ways to ensure consistency, maybe build in some accountability. Finding a language exchange partner seems like a fantastic route. Using websites or apps to connect with native speakers for regular chats, that gives you real-life conversations, spontaneity, the need to react, plus maybe some cultural exchange too. It's real communication, not just a drill.
Absolutely, language partners are invaluable, but consistency doesn't always require finding someone else. Simple solo daily practice can be incredibly effective too. The source material really highlights the value of just reading English texts aloud. It sounds simple, maybe even basic, but that simple act forces your mouth to produce the sounds and rhythms of written English. It helps you practice intonation, stress patterns, even if you're just reading a news article or a page from a book by yourself.
And we shouldn't forget techniques like repetition or shadowing either, where you listen to a short audio clip, maybe a line from a movie or a sentence from this podcast, pause it, and then immediately try to repeat it. You aim to mimic the speaker's speed, their rhythm, their intonation as closely as possible. Shadowing is repeating while they speak. Both build that muscle memory. The more often you actively produce English sounds and sentences under these kinds of consistent conditions, the more automatic and confident it becomes.
And remember, consistency really trumps intensity here. Doing 15-20 minutes of focused speaking practice, whether it's self-talk, reading aloud, or chatting with a partner every single day, is far more beneficial than trying to cram in a marathon 4-hour session once a month. Keep the engine running.
Okay, brilliant. We've built the mental resilience, got the tools, we're immersing ourselves, and we're committed to regular speaking practice. This sets us up perfectly for the final stage of refinement, making sure our output isn't just fluent, but also clear and easily understood. Which brings us to tip 9. Work on your pronunciation.
Yes, and clear pronunciation is so tightly linked to speaking confidence. It's hard to overstate this. If you're constantly worried that people are struggling to understand the sounds you're making, you'll naturally hesitate more, you'll hold back. Now, let's be clear. Achieving a perfect native-like accent, that's not the goal for most people, and it's often unnecessary, maybe even unrealistic. But achieving clarity, making sure you are easily understood, that is absolutely key. When people understand you without effort, your confidence just soars.
So when we talk about pronunciation, it's more than just mastering individual tricky sounds like maybe the English "the" or differentiating between ship and sheep. The analysis suggests we also need to become really attuned to the music of the language.
That's a great way to put it, yes. Beyond individual sounds, phonemes, the element that often makes the biggest difference to sounding natural and being easily understood is prosody. Prosody includes things like word stress, sentence stress, rhythm and intonation, the melody of the language. English, for instance, is generally considered a stress-timed language. This is different from many other languages like Spanish or French, which are often more syllable-timed. In English, certain syllables or words in a sentence receive more emphasis, more length, while others are shortened or sort of swallowed. Getting that rhythm right is crucial. Stressing the wrong syllable can sometimes even change the meaning of a word, or at least make it sound very unnatural.
Could you give us a quick example of that stress timing difference?
Sure, think about a simple sentence like, I want to go to the store. In English, the key content words get the stress. I want to go to the store. The little function words like to and the get reduced, spoken quickly. If a learner gives equal time and stress to every single syllable, I want to go to the store, it sounds quite robotic to a native ear and can actually be harder to process quickly, even if every individual sound is technically correct. So working on that rhythm, that stress and reduction, is vital.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we actually practice this music? What are the specific techniques?
Well, shadowing, which we mentioned earlier speaking, along with a native speaker recording, trying to match their rhythm and pitch contours exactly, is fantastic for prosody. You should also actively use online resources, phonetics guides, pronunciation apps that often focus on specific sounds and intonation patterns. And then there's the one everyone hates but is incredibly useful, recording yourself speaking.
Ah, yes, the dreaded self-recording. It's always so awkward hearing your own voice back, isn't it?
It really is,
Mhm.
but it provides the most objective feedback possible. Listen to your recording, then listen to a native speaker saying the same thing. Compare them. Where does your rhythm falter? Where is your intonation flat when it should rise or fall? It allows you to pinpoint specific areas for improvement. You have to be willing to listen critically, but kindly, to yourself, and then break down tricky words or phrases into smaller sound components. Practice them slowly, focusing on the stress and sounds, then gradually speed up. Better clarity directly boosts confidence by removing that fear of being misunderstood.
Fantastic. Okay, we've covered 9 really foundational practical tips. We've gone from mindset and managing fear through internal practice, vocabulary, phrasing, immersion, regular speaking, all the way to refining pronunciation and rhythm. This entire framework, all these strategies, they really all culminate in our final, perhaps most crucial directive, the synthesis of it all into action.
Exactly. Which brings us to tip 10. Simply start speaking English as much as possible. This isn't really a new technique. It's the action that activates and integrates all the previous advice.
It feels like the ultimate just do it step. This is the action that actually generates that positive feedback loop, that virtuous cycle we talked about earlier. The more you speak, even if it's imperfectly at first, embracing tip 1, the more comfortable you become, the more confident you feel. And that growing comfort and confidence then encourages you to seek out more opportunities to speak, which, naturally, leads to more practice, which further improves your fluency. It's the engine that drives all real progress.
And perhaps the single biggest takeaway, the most uncompromising message from the sources on this is, do not wait until you feel perfectly ready before you start speaking regularly. That feeling of readiness, it doesn't come before you start. It comes through the act of doing it, through the experience. You have to take that leap, jump into the conversation before you feel 100% prepared. Think of perfection as the destination you're working towards, not the ticket you need just to begin the journey.
So the call to action for everyone listening is, find ways to start speaking today. Seek out those opportunities. Find that language partner online. Join a discussion group or forum related to your hobbies or your profession, but one that operates in English. Or, if you live somewhere you have the chance, make a small challenge for yourself. Order your next coffee in English. Ask for directions. Make that phone call you've been avoiding. Every single time you open your mouth and use English in a real situation, every interaction you navigate successfully, or even awkwardly, is like making a deposit into your fluency and confidence bank account.
And maybe just a final word of encouragement. Learning a language, especially reaching fluency, is a significant undertaking. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a journey. So please be patient with yourself. Acknowledge the effort. Celebrate the small wins, every new phrase you use correctly, every conversation you participate in, every time you understand and are understood. Remember, even native speakers went through a long learning process as children, making countless mistakes along the way. Your goal is absolutely achievable with consistent effort, active engagement, and maybe most importantly, a positive, fearless attitude.
Wow, okay, that was a really thorough deep dive covering so much ground on cracking that fluency code. Just to quickly recap the core ideas, we need to embrace making mistakes, practice speaking regularly, build vocabulary and context, learn whole phrases, not just words, train ourselves to think in English, actively immerse ourselves, use self-talk, prioritize fluency over perfection initially, work on pronunciation, clarity, and rhythm, and finally, the big one, just start speaking as much as you possibly can, starting now.
That's it. We've laid out the framework, the knowledge distilled from the research. The next step, the consistent application and the sustained effort, that really has to come from you, the listener. And always remember that core idea. Confidence doesn't come from waiting for perfection. It comes from the act of communicating, from taking action, from being understood.
So as you finish listening today, before you jump to your next task, here's a final thought to take with you. We talked about tip 5, think in English, using that internal monologue as a practice tool. What if you committed to just, say, 15 minutes of actively narrating your next activity or your thoughts internally in English today? As you do that, consider this. Beyond the language practice itself, what other non-language skill, maybe patience when you get stuck, maybe mental discipline, perhaps even creative problem solving as you try to find ways around words you don't know? What else might you be unintentionally strengthening in that process? Start that internal dialogue right now and see what you discover.
That's a great challenge. Until next time, keep practicing, stay confident, and really do celebrate every single word you speak.
See you on the next deep dive.